There's a war going on every day that you may not know about, and today we learned a lot more about it. China striking at the heart of our economy. Iconic American companies like Ford and Google, the Pentagon too. Spies from China have also penetrated the computers of America's largest business organization, one with millions of members. And they're stealing corporate secrets worth thousands of jobs and billions of dollars. ABC's Pierre Thomas starts us off with more on this invisible but costly war.
As employees at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce worked, spies thousands of miles away in China were looking over their shoulders. For more than a year, hackers suspected of ties to the Chinese government had access to everything in Chamber computers, gaining critical information about major U.S. companies and their strategies for selling products.
We've never seen a country dedicate its resources, its espionage resources, to steal economic information and then use it against us, against our economy.
At one point, the penetration was so complete, a chamber thermostat was communicating with a computer in China. Another time, chamber employees were surprised to see one of their printers printing in Chinese. Congressional leaders say China is engaged in economic espionage on a scale never seen before. Sources tell ABC News at any given moment, there are hundreds of cyber attacks targeting U.S. companies and government agencies. In late 2009, authorities say China-based hackers broke into Google's computers and looked at the email accounts of human rights activists. In the same operation, 29 other companies were hit, including Dow Chemical, Yahoo, and Morgan Stanley.
It's reached an intolerable level, and it is getting exponentially worse.
2 years ago, an operative at Ford Motor Company downloaded thousands of files on hybrid engine design and gave them to the People's Republic. And design secrets for this U.S. stealth fighter jet were allegedly the target of a cyber attack traced to China. Take a look at China's version of the plane. Very similar.
This may be the greatest transfer of wealth through theft and piracy in the history of the world, and we are on the losing end of it.
How much wealth? Intelligence sources say the U.S. is hemorrhaging $250 billion in losses to economic espionage annually.
This is a national, long-term strategic threat to the United States of America. And this is an issue that a failure is not an option.
Tonight, officials at the Chinese embassy behind me say the charges are irresponsible and lacking proof, George.
But Pierre, as you know, and I know you've talked to the same officials, I've talked to American officials who say these attacks never stop. So what have you learned about what we're doing about it?
Huge issue, George, and officials tell me tonight that the U.S. government is considering legislation which will allow the government to share with private industry classified security techniques to block hacking.
Now, despite police from the CIA Pakistan reportedly gave the Chinese access to the crashed United States helicopter in Abbottabad after the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound. Our next guest says this is only the tip of the iceberg. He says the Chinese are stealing valuable U.S. secrets left and right and says this is a real crisis and the U.S. better take notice. Welcome to Fox News strategic analyst Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters. Lieutenant Colonel, it's great to have you. So how big of a threat is this right now from China?
Well, it's an enormous threat. And as you observed, in the last few days, the media is focused on the fact that the Pakistanis, our supposed allies to whom we give billions every year, allowed the Chinese to rip off patches, samples from our stealth coating on the helicopter to photograph it, etc. And that's important because it compromises military secrets. But as I hope we all know, the basis of a strong military isn't just the toys. It's really a strong economy. And China is assaulting our economy on multiple fronts with really grave attacks that Washington now realizes are happening but refuses to address. And I hate to add to the doom and gloom we've heard earlier in the show tonight.
Heard a little of that, yes. But go on.
Yeah, a little bit. But with China, we focus on the monthly trade deficits.
Right.
The real threat, I believe, is that China, with multiple, even hundreds of computer assaults every day on our government, our military, our major corporations, our banking system, they are stealing so much proprietary information that the mid to long-term cost to the U.S. economy may not be the trade deficit at all, but rather how much they have been able to steal. They steal from Google, they steal from General Electric, they steal from Lockheed Martin. And we're worried about our patent process, which does need to be improved in this country. The Chinese don't care about patents. They are stealing information.
And what are they
we
doing
spend
with
hundreds
it
of billions
exactly?
to
Are they
develop.
able to use this intellectual property and increase their own economy with it? I mean, is there actual application they're using with it? I mean, are there practical uses?
Well, that's a great question, and the answer is yes, no, yes, no, yes. They're able to certainly take our military secrets and use them to find vulnerabilities that they can attack, because, you know, our military is much stronger, but if you can leverage the vulnerabilities, just as like in the financial world, you can get ahead. On the economic side, yes, they can copycat. They can copycat up to mid-high tech at this point. They still can't build a good jet engine. They still can't duplicate what Silicon Valley does. But remember, in the 1960s, we laughed at Japan. You know, they just made Jap junk, just transistor radios. 20 years later, they were eating Detroit's lunch and making the best electronics in the world.
Yeah.
Now, so I don't want to overstate the Chinese threat, but Japan did that without stealing from us.
But is
The
it
Chinese
about,
are stealing everything they can steal. Ask
is it
Google.
about overstating the threat, though, or is it about the U.S. government not doing enough to investigate and to penalize the Chinese for this intellectual property theft?
You are asking all the right questions. My
Well, thank you.
compliments.
I'm trying.
But-
I did my research.
Yeah, I know. Well, hey, great. But the problem is our government is so timid. Now, the Chinese were doing some of this under Bush, so it's not a new thing. But they've really assessed President Obama as very weak, and correctly so thus far. So they have really stepped up their computer network intrusions, their stealing of data, everything from personal data to proprietary data. And we know it's happening, but our government's response, which is worried about, oh, legality, what happens, the Chinese might retaliate, we're basically, we're sticking to defensive ball. We're playing only a defensive game. It's like somebody's robbing your house and you close your eyes and say, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't steal. We need to hit the Chinese back and hit them hard. Otherwise, they will not get the message.
Lieutenant Colonel Peters, well, thank you for helping spread the message. Appreciate your time and your insights on this topic today.
My pleasure.
Joe Stewart's job is to protect U.S. businesses against cyber espionage.
Hundreds or thousands of companies, you know, are actively exploited and having their data stolen daily.
From this office in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Stewart began to trace one recent breach all the way to Henan province in China, directly to a man using the name Zhang Dong. He mounted a broad electronic offensive that culminated in an international cat-and-mouse game. On the other side, Chinese hackers working around the clock. Their target is U.S. internet traffic carrying sensitive emails, corporate and government information.
They've made the email look like something that recipient might want to open, and they've loaded that with some sort of malicious payload.
Last year, Stewart discovered the hacker he was looking for, Zhang Dong. After following a winding cyber trail, Stewart got a lucky break. Zhang used a domain name similar to one he had access to. This eventually enabled him to watch Zhang's espionage campaign unfold in real time. It targeted government ministries in Vietnam, Brunei, and Myanmar, regional companies, a newspaper, and a nuclear safety agency. Stewart, with some help from an anonymous researcher, followed fake identities to fake locations, to a PayPal account and an email link. The trail finally led to a real business called Henan Mobile Network, with a phone number belonging to Zhang.
We're not always sure if the information we have is accurate, right? We see a picture that somebody's posted with an online profile, and you know, that's something they posted themselves, so it really could be anybody.
Bloomberg reporters reached Zhang by phone. He acknowledged teaching at the People's Liberation Army Information Engineering Institute, China's main cyber war training center. But he declined to answer any more questions and hung up. It's a victory, but a hollow one, says analyst Alex Landstein.
What do you hope will happen? You hope they'll get arrested, you hope they go to jail, but it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen, analysts say, because many cyber attacks like this one are backed by the Chinese government.
The Chinese have, I believe, second only to the Russians today, an extremely capable offensive cyber program.
The Chinese, for at least a decade, have developed a worldwide program of using both military and civilian intelligence personnel to conduct cyber attacks against both governments and the private sector.
China's capabilities affect us in a number of ways, starting even before a confrontation might exist.
What they're doing is they're looking for that military edge, both by improving their own weapons and, more importantly, knowing how to beat ours.
They have the ability to go into our computer systems, potentially adversely affect logistical support, troop placements, the ability to move weapon systems, supplies, to be able to support forward projection in the Pacific region.
And China's alleged hacking could be deadly for U.S. forces on the battlefield.
If you mess with that software, the airplane won't fly, the missile will miss its target, and the ship might not get to where it was intended to go.
If you then go to the next area, the next phase of a potential combat, you have to worry about whether they can affect the ability to actually man your systems, or the ability to take out satellite transmissions so that the forward information that our troops, Navy, Air Force, etc. might need for placement, for targeting, all of those could be at risk.
But it's not just military targets that China's cyber soldiers are taking dead aim at. Through China's doctrine of unrestricted warfare, the People's Liberation Army is also planning to use tools like kinetic cyber attacks to disrupt, disable, or destroy everything from an enemy's banking and finance systems to its civilian infrastructure.
Kinetic cyber attacks are those in which you not simply spy on the other nations, but you implant malware which leads to destruction of the infrastructure or hardware of the other nation.
Whether it's critical national infrastructure, our water treatment plants, our hospitals, our electric grid.
The first person attacks in cyber gets a great advantage.
This isn't fantasy, this isn't paranoia, these capabilities exist today.
And they may strike first in cyber and we could be crippled.
After CNN made contact via email, the cyber hackers agreed to a meeting on the island of Zhoushan, a major port for China's Navy, just south of Shanghai. Here on the second floor of this residential building, they operate a hacker's website. 3 young men, all in their early 20s, who insist on not using their real names. No one wants to be identified. The apartment has cement floors and is sparsely furnished. Xiao Chen, his online name, tells me, no website is 100% safe. There are websites with high level of security, but there is always some weakness. They say their website has been operating for more than 3 years. They claim 10,000 registered users with 50,000 hits a day. Independent checks of the website by US-based computer experts confirm it offers useful advice and free software downloads for breaking into computer systems. First, you must know the website you want to attack, he says. You must know what program it's written with. You have to learn programming first. There is a saying, know about both yourself and your enemy, and you'll be invincible. On camera, Xiao Chen is careful not to mention the targets of their cyber attacks. But in conversations over 3 days, he claims 2 of his colleagues have hacked into the Pentagon, downloading information. CNN has no way to verify if that is true. They wouldn't publicize this, they wouldn't make it public, he says, later adding, it's very sensitive. The Pentagon says last year, computer networks in the US, Germany, Britain and France were hit by what they call multiple intrusions, many, they say, originating from here in China. US officials have been careful not to directly accuse the Chinese military or government, but add,
the way these intrusions are conducted are certainly very consistent with what you would need if you were going to actually carry out cyber warfare.
What is your response to that? Well, China denies that and has called on the US to prove it. If they have any evidence, I hope they would provide it. Then we can cooperate on this issue. But the hacker we spoke to, Xiao Chen, says after his colleague's cyber attack on the Pentagon, they were paid by the Chinese government, another allegation strenuously denied by Beijing. I'm telling you honestly, the Chinese government does not do such a thing.
These hacker groups, in my opinion, are not agents of the Chinese state. They are sort of useful idiots for the Beijing regime, but clearly they represent the elite skills that are necessary to conduct these kinds of attacks.
Experts say the biggest problem is actually proving where an attack came from, and that, they say, allows hackers like Xiao Chen to operate in a virtual world of deniability. And across China, there could be thousands just like him, all trying to prove themselves against some of the most secure websites in the world. John Vos, CNN, Zhoushan, China.